You're listening to the Vint podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint podcast, a production of the Vint Marketplace, your source for premium wine and spirits at vintmarketplace.com. This episode is presented by Coravin. Coravin is the world leader in at-home wine preservation, allowing you to pour a glass of your favorite wine and enjoy more bottles in your cellar without ever having to pop the cork. As always, I'm joined by Billy Galenko. Merry Christmas, Billy.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy Holidays for everybody else. I think Hanukkah starts on Christmas. It's rare that it actually happens.
That's right. Yeah, and we are releasing a slew of episodes right on the holidays, which hopefully, like we said last time, is good for your travels.
Mm-hmm. For sure. A gift for your ears. But yeah, and also a gift for your ears is this week's guest. I'm really excited. We have Eduardo Chadwick from Viñedo Chadwick. You may also know the wines that they produce, also Seña, which they produce in partnership with the Mondavi family. And they also produce Errazuriz, which is a really well-known producer for a range of wines, especially their Chardonnay and their Pinot Noir.
Yeah, and we, not to plug the Vint Marketplace, but we have a range of their wines on the Vint Marketplace and have the opportunity to try across the Errazuriz portfolio, the Chardonnays and Señas. Certainly one of my personal favorite wines, and I buy an anniversary bottle every chance I can scrape together the funds. Every time I can scrape together the funds.
For sure. It was pretty exciting to have him on, because ever since we had Amanda Barnes on, she's a South American wine specialist, we've been trying to get a guest from one of these top producers in South America. And I was really excited when the Viñedo Chadwick team agreed to come on, and we've been working for months. And then by the time that they had come on, a Chilean wine had won Wine Spectator Wine of the Year. It's like I knew Chile wines were great, and I knew I wanted to talk to them, or we wanted to talk to them. And then it was cool to see that happen. And then basically everything's snowballing. It's also the 20th anniversary of the Berlin tasting, which he talks about, which is where some Chilean wines beat a bunch of European French wines in a blind tasting competition. It's quite the year for Chile. So it's really cool to end the year on a high note for Chile.
Yeah, that's Chile's Judgment of Paris, or South America's Judgment of Paris, which, it's funny how those kind of catalysts bring a region to the forefront. But South America just generally, but then Chile here, we're resting today specifically, so many great value wines. So it's definitely like a place to dig into if you get captivated by Eduardo's story and what they're building there. Yeah, it's a place to spend a lot of time exploring.
Definitely. And then speaking of lists, that is going to be today's news from the Vint Marketplace News. The Wine Enthusiast 100 came out. I didn't realize until this year how many 100s came out, but everybody does one. But what I thought about the Wine Enthusiast one that was interesting is they cut out the really expensive things. They wanted to keep things that were within a general range. I think it was below $200. So let me read you the top 3. I think one of them you're going to be familiar with. Actually, I'll read you the top 5, but one you'll get a kick out of. So the first one is Rocco, ROCO. I've actually never heard of this producer. 2013 RMS Brut Delayed Disgorgement sparkling wine. It's a 10-year disgorgement, but it's from the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Was their number 1 wine of the year.
Wow.
98 points.
Rocco.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. I mean, I'm not like a savant of Willamette wines, but I feel pretty, or of Oregon wines. Is it Willamette Valley? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel pretty well versed, and I've never heard of that. That's pretty cool.
Agreed. Yeah. I feel like we've gotten between us pretty up on Oregon wines, and to find something that's this cool sounding without us hearing about it's pretty awesome. So
on a wine enthusiast list. So shout out whoever's writing these lists over there.
Oh yeah. Next was Caldorcia 2016 Poggio al Vento Sangiovese. So a Tuscan Brunello de Montalcino.
Nice.
3, here's the one I thought you would get a kick out of. I forgot you would get a kick out of the Oregon one. Is the Epic from Paso Robles 2021 Veracity Red was number 3 on their list. Got a 99 points.
Wow. Yeah, that's up on York Mountain. Actually, a really cool story about that producer, Epic, their tasting room. Was featured in Architectural Digest. They did like a whole revamp of that facility, and it's absolutely beautiful. York Mountain in general is beautiful, and make some of the top wines in Paso, and they've got good elevation there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that winery they have. It was like an old barn or winery. I'd been there too, and then they were at least when I was there, they had a like an old basket press just like hanging from the ceiling. It was really cool. Great
Yeah, they do.
wines.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like one of the better, call it like restorations and repurposings of a building that I've been able to go in and explore and experience, especially like even at a winery, especially at a winery. So it's super cool. And they make great wines, high alcohol and certainly fruit forward. But like if that's your style, I think would be really hard to do too much better in that region than Epic. So that's cool.
Agreed. And then to round them out, we have Costa Brown 2021 Mount Carmel Pinot Noir from Santa Rita Hills, which I also think is interesting down here in Santa Barbara. And then last but not least, we have a Castello di Nieve Reserva Santo Stefano Nebbiolo Albesane Barbaresco. So that is the top 5. Interesting to see 2 Italian.
I was going to say
3 American.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even if you said there are 3 American wines and none of them are Napa and 2 Italian wines and no French or even Spanish, honestly. I think that Spain's been doing really well on these lists, but I know that there's a lot of cultural relevance, I feel like, around these Italian wines right now. So that's not surprising, maybe.
Yeah. And I guess giving a shout out to us for having guests on from some of these areas, but also rounding out the top 10. In the top 10, there's also a Blaufränkisch from Marcus Altenberger. So shout out to Terry Thies. And then there's also a Domaine Pagao. It came in at number 9, their Cuvée Reserve 2019. So
that wine is so good. That wine is so good. Once I have a funny story about that. I went to a tasting. I might have told this story on the podcast a while back, but I went to a tasting one time at our storage facility in DC for the company, and I didn't have a bottle for some reason. I forget if I didn't have a bottle like good enough that I thought was interesting enough to bring. Anyways, I stopped by a shop on the way, Calvert Woodley's, shout out in DC if you're in that area. I stopped by and I grabbed a Magnum of the 2019 Reserva from Pagao, and I got skewered because it was like, at that time, it was probably like the current release. And you're drinking this wine out of Magnum current release, and people were like, "Oh, this needs to age for at least 7 to 14 more years." And I was like, "Okay," like storage facility people. So we opened it up, and by the end of the night, there was wine for everyone to drink because it was a Magnum. It wasn't like little sips out of the standard bottles, but also it opened up like crazy over the 2 hours that we were there, and it was like everyone was crowded around it by the end. So I felt both stupid and then justified. So,
well, then you felt extra justified when we talked to Laurence on the podcast. She basically told us how that was made, and it was just like, cool. No matter when you want to drink it, it sounds like it can last for ages. Wine. Yeah,
that's a cool list. That's a good list. I'll have to dig deeper into the wine enthusiast list. I'm usually not impressed, as most quote unquote wine people end up not being impressed by these lists, and I've been like underwhelmed by Wine Spectator recently, just in their list, not like necessarily the singular wines, but I think that this one sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, I almost wonder, like I saw it, it's coming out in the news from this past week. So I saw it a couple of weeks ago. I wonder if they waited till everybody else put their list out and then just tried to be different, or if they had it and I just missed like originally when it was published. But yeah, it was definitely a cool list. Worth checking out. Go through the link on the Vint Marketplace, get a look. But yeah, let's pivot over now then to our guest for today. As we mentioned, it's Eduardo Chadwick. Now, what's really cool is I think a lot of people, and I did more research, obviously just working for the Vint Marketplace, but then ahead of this call too, it's Viñedo Chadwick is its own domain. It's not just like a shell company that oversees Seña and Errazuriz. They are their own thing, and they have specific estate vineyards, which are really cool. And I think they basically were helping put Chile on the map. Like that Berlin tasting that we had talked about, there were Chilean wines put against other European wines, and the Viñedo Chadwick won top red wine. And it's a Cabernet mixed in with a little bit of Petit Verdot, and it's planted actually on Eduardo's dad's old polo field. I guess they had a polo field out there in Chile.
Right, yeah.
Which is pretty cool. It's like a very defined space, almost thinking of a Burgundy-sized vineyard or something. It's just a very defined space that became their estate vineyard there. So that was really cool to hear. He gives us a whole background on the family. And then he talks about how he connected with the Mondavis, and then they came up with the idea together to make Seña, which is really cool. I think Seña is possibly the most well-known wine for Americans because of that Mondavi link. The Mondavis helped them distribute. So that was really cool. And then also Errazuriz, I think we've talked about them a few times. Is what kind of the OG name from Chile winemaking back from the 1800s. They bought that property a long time ago and have been managing it really well. So it's pretty cool. He talks about not only the quality of the wine, but how they're also sold on the Place de Bordeaux. They were one of the first non-French wines to be sold on the Place de Bordeaux, which is like a big deal because it puts you on the international stage and puts you with these peers that are also sold via EP. So it was a really cool interview.
Yeah, Eduardo and his family historically are super connected because of the trade. And when I say connected, especially with getting wines out of South America, and obviously for their labels, Mondavi has been super important to some of that distribution as well. But don't let the big name and the partnership with Mondavi fool you into thinking that they're not like on the ground farmers with passion for terroir and for quality winemaking. It's one of those maybe semi-rare or maybe increasingly rare scenarios where the hype and distribution and accolades that get bestowed are actually like they hold up to that. So these are top quality wines. It'd be really hard to find these wines in other major regions for even 2 times the price. So great value.
100%. And yeah, it's to your point too. He also, I guess, I don't think the wine that won Wine Spectator of the Year this year for Chile would have been there without Eduardo, because he really pounded the pavement going around the world evangelizing Chilean wine. So it's part of this group effort, which is, it's cool to hear one of the pioneers who brought these wines to the world stage.
Yeah, you don't just make wine in a not remote, but like removed place, and then all of a sudden one day wake up and people are like on it just because it's good quality. So yeah, there's tons of people and effort that goes before, and Eduardo and his family have been part of that. So yeah, super excited. Hang in there with us and check out all that Eduardo has to share. And before I keep slurring my words, I'll just read you. Remember, if you're looking to drink more wine from your cellar without worrying about wasting what you can't consume, one of the Corvin systems will be your best friend, especially around the holiday season when people want to try all the wines in your cellar. You can visit corvin.com and use code VINT15 for 15% off your purchase of one of their devices. And if you're a member of the trade, visit trade.corvin.com and gift yourself from one of their range of products, which you can get exclusive discounts on, products for home and for work. But enjoy this interview now with Eduardo Chadwick.
Hi, Eduardo. Thanks so much for joining today.
Hi, Billy. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. I'm very excited to cover. Well, first, it's been a big couple weeks for Chilean wine. You had I guess this is the 20th anniversary year of the Berlin tasting. Wine Spectator's #1 wine of the year was a Chilean wine. So we're really excited to have you guys on here, some of the forefront of making some of the best wines in all of Chile.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really a wonderful celebration. It's also the first time that we had all the major wine critics of the world awarding 100 points to one of our wines, which is something that had never happened before, including the most renowned names from US, the UK, Germany, and around the world. So it's a nice year to celebrate the 20th anniversary, getting this full recognition, which was that's why we did it 20 years ago, when we didn't have any kind of recognition, when we were absolutely unknown down in Chile.
Oh yeah, like the reputation of Chilean wines has grown leaps and bounds. You guys have been making super quality wine for years. It's nice that you're finally getting the recognition. Can you give us a little background on your family's winemaking legacy in Chile and how we got to where we are today?
Absolutely. Well, the family story begins in 1870 when Don Maximiano Errazuriz founded the eponymous winery, Errazuriz, in the Aconcagua Valley, which is a beautiful valley north of Santiago, north of the Maipo Valley. In those days, wine was the beverage in Chile, and there was no other drink. So it was really a country devoted to drinking wine, but everything was drunk in Chile. I like to say that our forefathers were very selfish. They just drank it in Chile. So there were no exports. And that's why perhaps Chilean wines were not known, although we have a long tradition, as long as the same Spanish conquistadores brought the grapes to California and to Chile. But California and Napa got the limelight and started to get known more internationally earlier in the 1970s. In Chile, we didn't export until 1983. And that was the time when my father asked me to join. And that was the beginning of really our export drive. And there was also, at the same with exports, we began a little bit of a quality revolution. Everyone wanted to really produce better wines, find the best terroirs, and all the quality I would say, renovation or revolution, because it was a real change, started to happen around the mid-'80s. So it's been only 30 plus years of international exposure. And that's why perhaps Chilean wines have been rather unknown in the fine wine section, because in the early export, what Chile exported was basically wines for early drinking, wines for day-to-day consumption. And my life, I would say, mission has been, my dedication from the past 30 years has been to try to prove that we can produce wines in the company of the great wines of the world, like the best wines of Bordeaux, Tuscany, or Napa. And that was really what we tried to do with this Berlin tasting back in 2004.
When you think about those sort of best wines of the world regions that you mentioned, Bordeaux and Napa, Italy, Tuscany, that is there one of those particular regions that you feel the most, maybe not kinship with, but similarity to, or where you're maybe shooting for in terms of where you'd like to rest among those great regions?
Yeah, I would say I went to study. I'm a civil industrial engineer in Chile, so I had to really learn more about viticulture. I went to study in the University of Bordeaux, not really the full winemaking course, but it was a short course, and more than studying, but also visiting chateaus was what really opened my eyes to really how to elevate the quality of our wines. I remember one of the first chateaus I visited was Chateau Margaux with Popotalier, who had been a professor in Chile. So we had a good friendship, and for me, Chateau Margaux embodies the style and the quality that has always been my personal benchmark stylistically. And I would say that of course with Chile, we're not trying to do wines like Bordeaux, but stylistically, we have wines of great finesse, elegance, and great intensity. So I would say, and Cabernet is the king of our wine industry in Chile. So that's why I would say Bordeaux, fine Bordeaux is perhaps the most akin to our top red blends. Napa produces wines that are great with more richness and power. And I would say that particularly us as a wine family, we've tried to produce wines more in the finesse, elegance, more the climate we have in Chile, particularly in our properties, in the Maipo Alto, in Puente Alto, where we produce Viñedo Chadwick, is a climate of gravel. The soil is gravel soil, and the climate is Mediterranean, but with lower temperatures than Napa. So we produce wines of great finesse rather than power.
Yeah, I guess to piggybacking off that line of conversation, how much do you think about ageability, and how much of that is a target for you guys in terms of when you think about making a wine that can sit among quote unquote the best wines of the world? I feel like a quality of top Bordeaux and top Burgundy, obviously different grape varieties, but ageability is a target there for quality. How much do you guys think about that, and how much do you shoot to produce wines that can last a long time in the cellar?
Well, it's absolutely, as you say, for a great wine, for a terroir wine, you want to have ageability as part of the core pillars. And it's very important for us. Although we always try to have tannins that are very refined, that are very silky, very ripe, but not underripe, nor overripe. We want to have that perfect balance between freshness, tannin structure, tannin roundness. And our wines, we've been doing, particularly in this celebration of the Berlin tasting, we've been doing tastings going back 20 years and more. And the wines are showing beautifully. They're keeping the freshness, and they're keeping nice acidity, and longevity is what we look for the wines with purity.
For our listeners who may not be as familiar, can you share a little bit more about what the Berlin tasting was and how it was your judgment of Paris type moment for Chilean wines?
Yeah. Well, in the 1990s, when I was traveling around the world, showing our wines perhaps to start making a bit of the context, our family wines were Don Maximiano Fountain Reserve, was the historical flagship of our winery, which is a Cabernet base from the Aconcagua Valley. The second wine we created was a wine in joint venture with Robert Mondavi. We created Seña. Seña means the signal to the world. Back in 1991, we wanted to produce a wine like similar to when Bob Mondavi created Opus One in Napa Valley. He wanted to showcase that Napa Valley could produce wines of this caliber. When he came to Chile back in 1991, and I was happy to be his wine guide for a week, I took him across the different valleys. By the end of the journey, he told me, Eduardo, the soil and the potential you have here is great. And he wanted to do a wine in Chile that could help get the recognition for Chile. That was back in 1991. By 1995, he invited me and my family to produce a wine together that could have a role like what Opus One did for elevating the image of Napa. And we created this joint venture by the name Seña. Seña means signature or signal in Spanish. And the idea was to have a Chilean wine, a Cabernet based with Carmenere and Malbec to produce a wine that could really showcase Chile's best from the Aconcagua Valley. And then the third wine that forms a very top, the jewel of the crown, is Viñedo Chadwick. It's a small property in the Maipo Valley that was historically our home, where my father had vineyards in the 1900s. And then he had two passions. One was wine growing and the other was playing polo. He was the captain of the Chilean polo team. We had agricultural reform, so he could only keep the polo field and the house and the garden. And when he retired, he asked me to come and live in this property. And in return, I asked his permission to plant his beloved polo field into a vineyard. And that was the birth of Viñedo Chadwick back in 1993. And that is a pure 100% Cabernet Sauvignon wine, gravel soil, but is known to be the cradle of Chile's finest Cabernet Sauvignon historically, the Puente Alto district. And I created this wine, Viñedo Chadwick, back in 1999. So this was the three wines that were the history with Don Maximiano, the joint venture with Bob Mondavi, and Viñedo Chadwick, the tribute to my father. And I traveled the world presenting our wines, and I was very happy with the quality. The people loved them. But at the end of the tastings, people would ask me, Mr. Chadwick, what is your Parker rating? And embarrassingly, we didn't have any. And it was being absolutely set out of the club. It was not being rated was shameful because you were not part of the elite. And you were not considered really part of the fine wine world if you were not rated by the key critics. And we invited Parker many times. He never came to Chile. He was too busy flying between Napa, Bordeaux, Tuscany, whatever. But that was back in the 1990s. Happily, today we do have a nice Parker person coming to Chile regularly. And I think that because we didn't have this recognition, I thought to myself, how can I prove that our wines made it to be in the company of these great appellations? And that was the idea, how we honed the idea of doing a blind masterclass followed by a blind tasting. And for that purpose, I invited Steven Sparrow, who had done the Judgment of Paris back in 1976, to conduct this masterclass on tasting. And he selected the wines. For that, we selected the best of Bordeaux, Lafite, Margaux, Latour, 3 of the 5 first growth, and Sassicaia, Solai, Tignanello from Italy. And we selected the vintage 2000, which was the vintage that was just coming out, just being released. And also the vintage that had received 100 points by Parker. Most of the Bordeaux 2000 vintage was it's considered the very top of that decade. So this was David against Goliath. It was trying to put our wines in the company of these great wines. And I was just crossing all my fingers that I would have one of my Chilean wines in the top 5 to claim justly we are in the company. We should be considered in the company of these great wines. But as history was more generous and it was totally unthinkable, but our wines came in first place, Viñedo Chadwick 2000, in second place, Seña 2001, and in third place, Lafite 2000, which had been ranked at 100 points, and in fourth place, Chateau Margaux. So the world took note, and all the critics that were there, so you see the top European critics were really stunned. And then I think Chilean wines began to be thought in a different way. And it was not only just one tasting, but then I decided that to make this relevant around the world, we should do similar tastings, blind tastings around the world. So for the next 10 years, from 2004 through 2013, we conducted 22 tastings around the world, including New York, London, Beijing, Tokyo, the key capital cities of the world. When we did it in New York, we incorporated 2 California wines. We had Opus 1 and Stag's Leap, the classic the wines. So when we did in other places, we also had Vega Sicilia. So this was really to put our wines in benchmark with the best wines of the world. And what really moved the needle, made a change of mindset, was the consistency. We reached out to more than 800 key opinion leaders. And in more than 90% of the times of these tastings, we had 1 or 2 of our wines in the top 3. So we had very consistent results over different vintages because we moved across vintages over the years. So it helped. It helped, I would say, to accelerate the recognition of Chilean wines. And as you were pointing out, Billy, today we are very happy to celebrate together with the first 600 points. I call it Viñedo Chadwick 2021 because it was Parker, Sackling, Atkin, Peter Moser from Falstaff, Jorge Luque from Brazil, Lacab from Wine Club. So it's across the world. The key critics have recognized top wines, and then you have also this wonderful award for Don Melchor by Spectator. It's a new world. I think the world has taken notice that top Chilean wines have a place, and now the challenge is how do we keep on reaching out to the key consumers, to the key wine collectors. But things have changed in 20 years, indeed.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about is when you come back from Berlin and you, like you said, magically won this tasting, did that immediately change anything that you were doing? Or was it sort of like, we need to just keep doing the same thing? I'm sure you got all kinds of recognition. And how did your business change from that point?
Well, in those days, it was difficult because Chilean wines were not known. And to get a commercial impact, you need to be in good distribution. And at the time, our partners, Robert Mondavi, had just lost the control of the winery. I lost the distribution we had with Robert Mondavi Corporation. And because of that, I decided to go to La Place de Bordeaux for distributing our wines, Viñedo Chadwick and Seña. And building your presence in La Place de Bordeaux takes time. So I would say that in the early days, it was really still step by step getting more recognition around the world. And also because what happened in Germany, when I came to some other markets, they told me, well, but this happened in Germany. If you want to impact Steel or the US, you should come and do it here. And at first, Brady, I was really a bit afraid if I do a second tasting, well, the result can be very different. So it could ruin the impact of the first tasting. But that was an act of bravery, you don't want to say more than the first one. And I took the challenge, and the second tasting happened in Sao Paulo. And the results were different, but very consistent. In first place came Chateau Margaux, but in second place, 2001, came Viñedo Chadwick, 2000, and third place, Seña, 2001. So it was very, very consistent. And then that gave me the strength or the energy to then take this tasting on a world tour. And then we went to Tokyo, and again, we had 4 of the top 5. When we came to New York in 2010, I had incorporated one of our our top Carmenere by the name Kai. And surprisingly, we had top Napa for Opus 1, Stag's Leap. We had Lafite, Margaux, then we had Sassicaia. So we had best wines of Napa, Bordeaux, and Tuscany. And surprisingly, in New York, the number 1 spot was for Kai, this Carmenere from Chile, which made it really, really an amazing story. But now the challenge is how many people know about this story. Unfortunately, we don't have the funds of Hollywood, and you have a couple of films being done for Bottle Shop. There's a book, and the Napa Wine Institute every 10 years will celebrate the Judgment of Paris. We are a family more modest, modest means, and our challenge is to really celebrate the story. And that's what we're doing, celebrating this story around the world. And I'm so happy to be with both of you, Brad and Billy, to share this historical moment for Chile.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the three wines and how they're a little bit different. But before I want to dive in, do you think, so like the name Errazuriz, there's a lot of Basque influence in the earlier days in winemaking in Chile. Is that correct? And do you think that led to more focus on these Bordeaux varieties because of the proximity of where they came from rather than maybe some other varieties? Or what do you think led to that focus, the Carmenere?
Yeah. In the 1870s, when Errázuriz was founded by Don Maximiano Errazuriz, he was already a Chilean. The Errázuriz family came to Chile in the 1700s. So it was really
hundreds of years. Yeah.
Hundreds of years before. And they went to Bordeaux because Bordeaux had the fame. That was the reason. Bordeaux was the first region to be reckoned in 1855 with the classification. And so the Chilean winemakers all went to Bordeaux to study at the Université de Bordeaux. And also the great varieties that we had in Chile were mainly Bordeaux-based, Cabernet, Merlot, Carmenere, that came from Bordeaux. So I think that was the reason why we had this original vision that Bordeaux was the sort of the top expression for the great varieties we had in Chile. I think that was a link between Chile and Bordeaux professors, studies, and the same grape varieties.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I read that section in Hugh Johnson's The Story of Wine, like the part on Chile and how it really started getting going more in the late. And they were just drawing, I think the parallel they were trying to draw at that time was like, just as Rioja and Vega Sicilia was starting to get established, like the top wineries in Chile were also getting going at the same time, while Errazuriz was making his wines. So I guess they were trying to draw a more tenuous link. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you guys purchased the Errazuriz as the winery, and then you guys expanded your own personal projects. Can you just walk us through a little bit of the nuances of those wines versus your Viñedo Chadwick and the Seña?
Yeah. Well, my father is the fifth generation of the Errazuriz family. My grandmother is Errazuriz. My father is Alfonso Chadwick Errazuriz. So he took control of the winery back in 1983 when we were coming out of agricultural reform, and the idea was to expand. Because of agricultural reform, Errazuriz only had 10 hectares in the Aconcagua Valley. And from there, we started expanding, adding little plots of different places where we planted vineyards in the Aconcagua Valley. And that was the first 10 years of development, really expanding the Aconcagua Valley vineyards. And then when Mondavi came in 1995, we developed Seña. It's a property also in the Aconcagua Valley, but cooler than Don Maximiano, in the coastal mountains near the sea. So it's 40 kilometers from the sea. We want to grow Seña to be a blend wine with only 50% Cabernet Sauvignon. The balance is Merlot and Carmenere, and to make a wine that is very sensual, very elegant, seamless, more than a Cabernet that is more sturdy. And then Viñedo Chadwick was born, as I said before, from the Maipo Alto property, which was my father's home. And when he retired, he asked me to live there, and I planted this to give him a tribute as a post tribute after he passed away.
That makes sense. And then you have these Bordeaux blends, but then also Errazuriz has some of the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay too. Is that right, or is that a different?
Yeah, I would say that the Bordeaux blends has historically been the backbone of our Chilean wine industry. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have really obtained significant recognition, as we were talking, with the Berlin tasting, with the ratings. That's where the critics have already, I would say, fully recognized where we are. But we also have a beautiful coastline, and I think, like you have Carneros and other places near the coast, and I think there's also beautiful opportunities to develop fine Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from the coastal plains. We have a property just 10 kilometers off the Pacific Ocean, which is very cold because we have the Humboldt Current coming from Antarctica. And there we have a schist soil where we planted Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and this is called Las Pizarras, and it's a really very nice, it's a beautiful, fresh mineral style of wine. And very much, I would say, but the benchmark there would be more Burgundy, wines of great minerality and finesse. And we are very fond. It's a project we are developing. I think there's a great potential, but I think we are still, we have years ahead to get more recognition as we have done with the red blends.
Yeah, I was going to say for the marketplace, our Vint marketplace where we sell wines. We've had a few events, both Brady and I have both led them, where we've served some Las Pizarras, both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, is just to show people quality wines that they might not expect. And they're definitely they're fantastic. The minerality, especially on the Chardonnay, really stands out. And a lot of people are surprised that they're from Chile. And then we show them, we did it in a blind tasting setup, and it's really interesting. So I just wanted to make sure we talked about those wines in addition to the ones that I think everybody else also knows a lot about.
We might do a blind tasting in the future, although it could be very expensive, though. If we have to benchmark with the top wines of Burgundy, it could be terribly expensive, but perhaps that could be an idea. But they are getting recognition. They are getting recognitions. The good thing is that some critics are coming to Chile regularly, and we're having a good international exposure. Our wines are also today distributed in some parts of the world by La Place de Bordeaux. So we have different negociants that take our wines from Asia, although we also have good partners in the US and around the world as an agency.
Yeah, speaking about the Pizarras Chardonnay, when we served at some tastings, every time we do wine tastings, you always have people who say, "Oh, I don't like Chardonnay," and which is always very funny to me. But to be able to introduce them to Chardonnay from Chile, something, again, that they've never had most of the time, is a great way to tell the Chardonnay story, I think. So I just want to comment that, because the amount of times people will say, "Oh, I don't like Chardonnay," and then pass it across. And yeah, it's an excellent experience.
I agree. And I think people don't realize that Chile can produce wines of real minerality, freshness, and when we tasted it with some of the top sommeliers of the world, I think the reference is mainly to Polymo Trachet style of minerality, of freshness, of real wines of great, very floral, very intense. More than that's the style we produce for Las Pizarras. It's not the style of the buttery, big Chardonnay that was the epitome of the Napa in the past. It's more into the Burgundy freshness and minerality.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing way for Chile to introduce itself. You'll have to have a tasting alongside the top Burgundy Chardonnay in the world now.
Yeah. It's been a journey. It's a journey of 10 years that we're celebrating. This year we did a world tour, and as Billy was saying, also tasting wines going back to the year to 1980 was what we had a wine in 1980, the first wine from Don Maximiano. And then we went also with the 1990, 2000. So showing the longevity, the beautiful aging potential of our wines. That's a key part for collectors.
Also, can you comment a little bit? You mentioned how you looked at the plots as a way to start distributing more globally. I feel like it's become really popular for producers throughout the world now to try to get positioned on the plots. Can you talk about what it was like to be an early mover there? Was it harder to get your wines on there now? Because I feel like everybody's like, oh, there's Australian wines and other things for the same reason. But can you talk about what that was like back when you were trying to get on there?
Yeah, when we started back in the year 2009, it was very, very few. It was just from outside Bordeaux, it was Maceto and us. We were kind of that's where the first ones to enter La Place. At the time, it was no other California wine except for Opus One that some stage entered, but Opus One had the connection with Mouton Rothschild, so it was really not a real outsider. And there was a lot of tension in those days by 2010, 11, because some Bordeaux Chateau owners were not happy that the négociant would take on wines from outside Bordeaux. So at the beginning, in true honesty, there was no fireworks to welcome us in La Place. It was a bit the contrary. It was this tension of some chateaux trying to keep La Place just for Bordeaux wines. So we had to navigate gently, but a little bit underwater, and really building distribution in a nice way, in a sort of gentle way. And I would say that then our wines, Seña, Viñedo Chadwick, were very successful, together with Almaviva, together with Maceto, with Ornellaia. And then there was a handful of wines, and then the négociant wanted to expand. They came to Napa. Now you find, some of the top wines from Napa, and then they started coming. I think you have more than 150 labels nowadays. But by 2010, it was just a handful. We were just a few making an inroad and suffering this headwind, but we succeeded, and La Place succeeded. Perhaps today we have other challenges. Perhaps there's been, some people say that perhaps too many wines are now in La Place de Bordeaux. Well, we know that currently we are in a bit of a world wine crisis, and I think we need to wait and see that the waters will come again, and building brands for the long term. That's where we are. Our brands have been built over the past 30 years, and we see La Place as a excellent partner for giving us good distribution. But in true honesty, also the marketing, or the way we present our wines, is done by our marketing team, by our winemaker, and by our family. We go to the market to present the wines, to do tastings, to enjoy, to have people really understand our wines and our story. And that's something that you need to really understand. La Place is a wonderful strategic partner in distribution. But the brand has to be done by the family and by the brand owner. And that we have very clear.
Well, and I know other wine regions, especially here, when you think about Napa, has become such a sort of a tourist destination. Hospitality is a big part of how that marketing and brand presentation is done. How has that changed for you over the last decade or so in terms of investing in tourism, and even other producers maybe can speak to how tourism to that region has changed over the last couple of decades? What efforts you're making?
Well, we are traveling. We as a team, we travel around the world. We have a team that is based in New York, in London, in China, in Brazil. We have a team of people that are conducting seminars, tastings, that are helping to promote and to educate on our wines in the key markets. And at the same time, our wine is open for tourism, for high level tourism. So one of the elements that we want to really develop more and more precise is really high end wine tourism. That's something we have in our mind. That's something that started to come to Chile after this year 2000 and 2001 and 2, that we're very close to the world. I think the opportunity to travel and to visit the estates in a personalized way is a nice pillar. And Chile is a beautiful destiny. It's a beautiful tourism destiny. So that's something that we are working on to make it more stronger, to offer a stronger experience.
With climate change being a hot topic for a lot of folks throughout the wine industry, I know Chile as a whole country is leading kind of the march, or the charge in sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys have been doing, the efforts you put in, and then how you want to see this going forward, and how that's happening and impacting your wines?
Well, Chile is a very narrow country. The average width is around 180 kilometers from the Cordillera de los Andes to the Pacific Ocean, and from a very cold ocean and to the very high peaks. And the main impact of climate change is the dryness. We have less rain, particularly in the north of Chile. But temperature is not really a key issue, because of these two elements, the sea, the cold Pacific Ocean, and the mountains, the temperature is not really the key factor, rather than the water supply. So for water supply, we are building more dams. We are building more infrastructure to get more water, to retain more water, because a big chunk of the water is lost in wintertime. With all the rain, it flows down to the Pacific Ocean. And we want to retain that water. Well, the first big reservoir is Los Andes itself. We have the melting snow, is what gives us the rivers. So that is one factor. And the other one is also planting our vineyards nearer to the sea, where you have more coastal breezes. That's why Seña, for example, was planted just 40 kilometers from the sea. In the past, most vineyards in Chile were planted more inland, 70, 80 kilometers, where there's more warmth. So there's been a lot of adaptation. Some wineries are also going further south. The further south you go, it's going to be cooler and more rainy. Those are the adaptations that we're doing in Chile, in addition to have a very sustainable mindset. We as a winery, we have biodynamic farming at Seña, and that's the best way we can protect our soil and really look after our vineyards in a long-term perspective by using compost and all the elements of biodynamic farming.
When you're in the markets and you're trying to explain a little bit more about like biodynamic farming, are you facing some of the same issues that some people have explaining the difference between that and sustainability and all the extra effort that goes into really taking it to the biodynamic stage as opposed to just like organic?
It's a big effort. And to be honest, we're not, although we farm under biodynamic principles at Seña, we believe that that's the best way to protect the soil and to produce a wine that is truly a terroir wine. We're not participating in the biodynamic. There's a wine group that is talking about only biodynamic wines. We believe biodynamic as one of the pillars of viticulture. But when we present Seña for its history, how it was built as the first Aragon wine from Chile in joint venture with Bob Mondavi, all the history behind it. And biodynamic is something that is helping us to produce grapes of better quality and with a long-term respect for the property, more than trying to get into the biodynamic wine gang, which I have a great respect, but we see it more as a tool or more than a tool. It's a philosophy of truly respect for a terroir wine.
Yeah, more of a philosophy rather than a religion or a group where you look down upon other people doing it other ways. Yeah, no, that would completely make sense. Are there, with the way that your portfolio is growing and you're working on, is there anything that you are excited about moving forward, or is it more just continuing to build the reputation and the excellence of your vines that you already have planted?
I think it's more the second. We believe we have historic wines that have made history for Chile and in the world. As you have the Opus 1 of Chile, Sassicaia, we were at the forefront of this discovery of Chilean wines. And we believe there's still a lot of stories. There's a lot of work in telling the story. We believe that, particularly in the US market, there's little knowledge about our wines. And it is our challenge to really tell the story in the right way, to reach the right people. Today, we have a couple of brand ambassadors based in the US working in really presenting the wines to the right people, to the right consumers. We have a beautiful portfolio, the wines we talked about, and then also Las Pizarras, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. And for the time being, that's where we want to really focus more on getting the message across the key wine lovers.
Well, I think it's working pretty well. If our marketplace is any evidence, I think there's a lot of people who do recognize the quality, and yeah, I think it's definitely, you guys are doing a great job. So thanks so much for joining and sharing your story.
Thank you to you, Billy and Brady. It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much for this very interesting conversation and sharing what we're doing here in Chile.
Yeah, thank you. All right, that was our interview with Eduardo Chadwick. I hope everybody goes and checks out either Viñedo Chadwick, Seña, or some Errazuriz. You can get them all on the Vint marketplace. And I hope you maybe taste across all of them and use the Coravin to do so. If you use your Coravin, you can taste all of these wines without having to pop the cork. And this is our episode for this week. We'll be back with another episode next week. Cheers.